As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. We also briefly talked about, I'll put this up here, briefly talked about this raise. It's a company he's involved with, Toya. They raised $4 million after one of their games, Miraculous Ladybug, crossed 200 million plays on Roblox. Now, what I think is interesting, and I'm curious to get Jeff's take on this specifically. Toya raised most of the money. The largest investor, I think, in this round was Draftkings. Interestingly enough,
was it the drive by Draftkings, like
yes,
their VCR?
Yes.
Interesting.
And I'm curious what you think is the play there, right? Because, you know, and I asked, so you guys will tune in tomorrow, you'll hear Mike's answer. But the question I asked was, Roblox has arguably a younger audience, and we know that's to some extent untrue, right? Like it does have an audience that's a bit older also, but still a large majority that's younger. Why would DraftKings, a betting gambling business, want to back a game startup? And these games are targeted primarily also at women. They're more majority developed by women, targeted at women, and DraftKings is an investor, but it's on Roblox.
I guess I sort of lost the question there a little bit, but one thing I would say first,
I'm curious. Put money there?
It sounds like Mike would have a much better perspective than I, but I guess the first thing I would point out is that the drive by DraftKings, I think, DraftKings is clearly involved based on the name, but it's not like DraftKings, the corporate entity. It is a separate fund that they are kind of invested in. So and Jason Robbins, I think, is involved like on the board of that fund, but they're not necessarily controlling the investment. So I imagine the fund has a broader mandate, and clearly in investing in gaming and user generated content, stuff like that is a hot theme for any VC right now. So that it could be as simple as that. To answer your question, which I think was sort of leading to the answer in general, DraftKings is looking to get a younger, more diverse, more female audience. So that could also be why they're interested, to the extent that this investment has DraftKings fingerprints on it to some extent. The thing that I want to bring up and hear people's perspective on, and this is something I think I wrote about in our weekly newsletter last week or the week before, is just how we're starting to see a lot of investments into publishers and developers building on the Roblox platform, which was probably sort of inevitable, but I think it's a really interesting trend. And I just don't know what to make of it in terms of, one of the beautiful things about Roblox and all of these platforms is that they're user generated content. And that was kind of the network effect and sort of how these businesses, spin the flywheel. Does professionalizing the development and the publishing of games on these platforms end up hurting that overall eventually?
You think so? Jorge, say that again. What ends up hurting it overall?
The fact that you're now going to have professional developers and publishers.
Why does that hurt the ecosystem overall?
Well, it's sort of a question. I don't know that it.
Is it because you think it's winner take all or winner take most?
I guess it could be similar to the App Store model, where eventually the professional developers, which no one's saying that killed the App Store. It's more of a probing question. You could a little bit make an argument that if all of the eyeballs start accruing to these professional games and these published games who are putting money behind user acquisition and driving eyeballs to those particular games, it could lead to less user generated content, which over long term will be worse for the platform.
Maybe, not necessarily.
That's interesting.
What's your view?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point, because I more so wonder about like the court of public opinion. I don't think it would necessarily hurt the companies, but I think that they could face some backlash from users if it becomes like if Roblox became all professional developers that were, owned by Roblox, I think that I do think people would be upset for a bit, but I don't know that it would be enough to cause them to leave the platform. But it is, Jeff, that's a really interesting thing to think about. Like what happens when these things are what happens when Minecraft is all the same or one or two development companies that are owned and there's no, and it's just it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down.
I think my view on this is pretty black and white, which is like if EA and Activision tomorrow both made games for Roblox, right? Like if we saw them build two AAA mods for Roblox, right? And a bunch of users moved to those games and spent a lot of time on those games. Like I think the majority of the Roblox user base wouldn't care, right? They're there to play fun games. If it just so happens EA and Activision make fun games, do the users really care who the developer is? I don't think so.
Probably
I
not.
think it's a winner take most.
Does it kill their metaverse story to some extent? And also just, do they start to say, hey, we want a bigger cut of the profits because we're now publishing and we're now, developing on these platforms and all of your users are playing our game, like give us more money. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure it ever gets there. I just think it's I generally think I agree with you. I just am a little bit playing devil's advocate, but I think it's something that's interesting to think about. As we talk about all the positive benefits of user-generated content and these two-sided platforms, what happens when these things start like that, and then they become not that? What does that do to the profit pools and the economics?
Let me just read a couple of comments here, and then I have another Roblox story which I want to attach this to and start with. Chris says, Vorhaus has been a beast in the space for well over a decade. Looking forward to the podcast. Chris, I'm really curious what you think of it. Would love to get your thoughts and opinions.
I'm also so glad to have you back, Chris.
And it's true. And Greg says the profits overlooking the new trend in Ladybug racing. Is there a trend in Ladybug racing?
It's
is
the
this
next
a thing?
esport, actually.
Is this what we're going to say is an esport? Chris says Roblox is a mall, publishers renting spaces, indies chilling in the food court. Yeah, I think that's what ends up happening, right? If we get this to, that's a really good analogy, I think, in terms of where this ends up.